Hello, everybody, and welcome to Mix Up Sports, brought to you by Twitch.tv. I'm Krisha Ryan. I'm joined on my right, Frank Marchese, and across from me, Nick Seston. Boy, how you guys doing?
Good, good.
Doing good.
Well, we're going to start off today in the world of the NBA. Today, not today, but recently, the Brooklyn Nets waived Joe Johnson's contract, allowing the veteran to become a free agent but still be eligible for playoff contention. Um, as far as any teams that have been looking to pick him up right now, sources have been stating that Heat are most likely going to sign him. However, it's been also notified that LeBron James and the Cavaliers have been looking his way.
And it's something you knew was coming. The Nets are in a rebuild stage. They have a new GM. They're sort of tearing the old regime that didn't win down, and they're creating a new one. It's this was a move on a $24 million contract. This was a guy you were not going to trade. This was the obvious decision if you were not going to keep Joe Johnson for the rest of the year, which with where they are in the standings was pointless. To waive Joe Johnson, it was the smartest move by the Brooklyn Nets. And, I mean, I think Miami would probably be the best fit for him.
I mean, with Joe Johnson, like you mentioned, with his $24 million salary, I mean, you said it best. It's hard to trade him because no one wants to take on that cap because he's not the player he once was. Go back a few years when Brooklyn, when they got him from the Hawks, and then they made that super trade to get Kevin Garnett and Paul Pierce. I mean, seemed like a good idea at the time, but now it didn't work out. They didn't win then, and they're kind of the Brooklyn Nets are kind of left without any draft picks to rebuild right now, and they're in a bad spot. So they had to start somewhere, and they're
I
cutting
think
ties.
Brooklyn has a draft pick to themselves until I think 2018, so it's another 2 years I think before they have their own draft pick.
Yeah, it's a rough time for any Brooklyn Nets fans out there, if there are any. But I mean, Joe Johnson, you weren't going to trade him, so you had to cut him or waive him, and I mean, the Heat, they could use him. They're in playoff contention, but then with the complications with Chris Bosh and his medical issues, they need someone else to provide some type of spark at all for them. And Joe Johnson, he can be that guy. He can play shooting guard. He can bump it up to a small forward, and he's still got a 3-point shot on him. Not quite as deadly as he was in his prime, but he can still shoot the rock, and so he can be a valuable asset to whichever team picks him up.
Well, with that statement, Joe Johnson's only averaging above 11 points a game as a starter. Granted, that was in the Nets position, in the Nets system. However, I don't expect
As a starter, though, getting 34 minutes a game.
Yeah, I don't expect him to do any big steps as far as doing anything as spark for the Miami Heat if he ends up going there. Granted, it will be a great fit. It also reminds me of like a Danny Granger kind of thing. He's a role player who could possibly provide those off the bench points. Because he's getting up there in age. He's going to be he's essentially a veteran where he can produce those quality minutes. I don't expect him to be a starter because we see what that's done this season for him. He's not the same Joe Johnson we know. And, for the Nets, I think it's just the best move. And if Miami gets them, well, good for them.
It definitely. I mean, just looking over his season stats, I mean, it's unbelievable the decline that he's hit. Really, not even since just joining Brooklyn. He started to show signs of this in his last year in Atlanta, where he was starting that downhill trend and coming to Brooklyn. Yeah, he got a little bit of a kick, but ever since then, he has been downhill big time.
Yeah, I mean, he obviously isn't the player he once was. I think he's up to getting around 34 years old, and so you're not going to get that much production out of a guy like that. But he can be a valuable, maybe a sixth man or just coming off the bench for Miami to give them that spark that maybe they're missing the 3-point specialist they had in Ray Allen. Granted, Joe Johnson isn't as great as a shooter as Ray Allen is currently, but he can at least try to alleviate that because right now they don't, without Chris Bosh, they don't have really a much of a 3-point threat. You have a couple guys, but they need someone to help to stretch the floor and to spread out the defense, and so this might be able to kind of help the Heat not feel the loss of Chris Bosh as much, and could lead them into the playoffs.
Well, all we can say is time will tell. And as far as teams letting go of players, we have a team who actually kept a player in the world of the football in the NFL. We have the Chicago Bears announcing that they used a franchise tag on Alshon Jeffrey, the wide receiver for them. I think personally this is a great pickup. Not a great pickup, but a great choice for them. As far as having a number one receiver, he is that guy for them. Jay Cutler, I'm hoping for their sake, he steps up and becomes a better quarterback for such a great young receiver. So overall, I think it's a good job by the Bears.
I mean, not only is Alshon Jeffrey that number one receiver that you want on your team, I mean, he can go up and get the ball. He can, he'll get you. You can count on him to catch the ball in traffic on third downs just to get that first down. He's a great receiver, and he would have been one of the top free agents in this free agency class. And so, I mean, it was a great move to keep him because he's pretty much one of their only superstars. You lost. There's reports that Matt Forte, he's done in Chicago and he's moving on, so they need to find someone to replace that. And not only does that help Jay Cutler have another target with Alshon Jeffrey, to keep him, but also you got Kevin White coming back off of an injury. So, I mean, that could be a good Bears wide receiver core with Jeffrey, Kevin White. I think Eddie Royal's still there. They have some decent receivers there. It'll be interesting to see what they can do next year.
He played 9 games last year for the Chicago Bears. 54 catches for 807 yards. He only caught 4 touchdowns. He had 4 games of over 105 yards. Only 2 of the 9 games did he not have at least 78. It's a huge, huge target for Chicago. The fact that they missed him for so long last year, literally half the season, was a killer to them. Now you franchise tag him, you have him for another season. Jay Cutler, you saw, definitely had a turnaround at the end of last season. This is a guy who could have had 1,700 yards if he'd have played a full season. This was the smartest, wisest move that the Chicago Bears could have made this offseason after letting Forte walk, not really bringing anyone in to keep your number one wide receiver, to keep your star wide receiver, was a very, very smart move for the Bears.
And with them, keeping him, it also opens the door for more possible free agents to go, well, they've already got a great player in their system. They could use another good player. And if you have a better receiving core, that'll work out. That's also a thing you have to look at as far as in this upcoming offseason that we're currently in. You guys mentioned the Matt Forte move. They still have Jeremy Langford, who we saw last year was a breakout season in the running back position. And you guys stated it too, that Jay Cutler easily had a turnaround season towards the end of it, who can hopefully transition that into the next season. And with this, signing, it can only go up from here. Him being out, it was obviously a low point for them. But bringing him back, you mentioned his stats, how great of a player is. I don't see why they can't be better than they were last year.
Now let's not forget this kid's only 26 right now, and I mean he's easily going to be one of the bright stars in this game if he's not already. And so
there's plenty of room to grow too.
Yeah, he's got plenty of room to go. He's got that 6'3" frame, so that contributes to his ability to go up and get those balls and shield defenders from it. and so he's a very valuable asset to the Bears, and we've mentioned it before. They really need to try and get this production from where Matt Forte left this gaping hole. So this will definitely help, bringing Alshon Jeffrey back and not letting him go into free agency, because I mean he was one of the names that was thrown around for the Lions to really try and replace Calvin Johnson. So it'll be interesting to see what the wide receiver market in free agency holds after he's gone, and I expect to be some overpaying for some wide receivers in free agency now.
You don't want to let a player like Alshon Jeffrey walk. He's the kind of guy that if he's in a contract year that you don't think he's going to re-sign, or you don't think you have a future with him, he's the kind of guy you would definitely try to trade to bring somebody in, or to bring draft picks in. He's not the kind of guy you would just let walk, especially to a team like the Detroit Lions. You do not want a player like Alshon Jeffrey walking to a divisional rival. That is one of the worst, if not the worst case scenario for the Chicago Bears as far as a player with the skill and the caliber of an Alshon Jeffrey. This was the only decision that the Chicago Bears had. And yes, I agree now we saw it in Major League Baseball. When you're paying guys like Jason Hayward $200 million, a guy like John Lackey 41, it shot the market up. And I think now it's going to do the same exact thing in the NFL. Now you're going to see these players the big players are now gone. You're gonna start to overpay now to get some players to go to you to help you out.
I want to go back to what you stated on the division rivals. Nobody, you don't want to lose a good player to a division rival. In other news, though, to go along with the division rivals, it's rumored. I say rumors because we don't know for 100% sure if this is going to be the case. That Philadelphia Eagles are looking to trade DeMarco Murray back to the Dallas Cowboys. For Dallas Cowboys, if it ends up being the case, I think it's a great move because we saw what running back trouble they had last year. Granted, towards the end of the season, I believe McFadden was the one who brought it up. But other than that, they need a new, or not new, but essentially a better running back in there because their running backs that they previously had are now ending up in jail. Cough, cough, Joseph Randall.
I mean, DeMarco Murray had no doubt one of his best seasons as a Dallas Cowboy 2 years ago before the Eagles. And it seemed with how they were using him as though the Eagles signed him to almost just take him away from the Cowboys because they didn't use him correctly. He's more of a downhill runner, and they were trying to use DeMarco Murray like they used LaShawn McCoy, who those are two very, very different styles, and it just wouldn't work. And so I don't see the Eagles and DeMarco Murray having a future in this league based on those facts alone. He did not have a good year. He started to pick it up a little bit near the end of the year, but I mean, he only had maybe 2, 3, 4 games over 100 rushing yards. It didn't work out, and they have to trade him somewhere. Now, you wouldn't want to trade him to a division rival, but that might be your only choice.
Hey, to go back to the games over 100 yards, don't forget this guy had 2 yards total through 3 games. Okay, and the problem with this is, again, you don't want to trade to a divisional rival because the last time he was on that divisional rival, he had the most rushing yards out of anyone in the NFL. The problem with the trade is Philadelphia has to eat $13 million in cap, and then Dallas is going to have to pay him $7 million. Not forget about that. Now you got to try to send somebody to ship to Philadelphia to try to get him. For DeMarco Murray, I understand. I understand that I understand he wants to leave. Trust me, we in New York, we have a saying: "Foo Philly." Nobody likes Philly. Nobody wants to be in Philly. And I think that this Chip Kelly experiment is something that Philadelphia is going to be feeling for quite a few years now. That all the players he brought in are now going to want to leave. DeMarco Murray, I think, is the first in that case. If he does not get traded, I think he's the kind of guy, if he was unhappy enough, which it definitely seems as though he was, is the kind of guy who would hold out as long as he possibly can until he does get traded somewhere. I don't see DeMarco Murray playing for the Philadelphia Eagles next season.
I want to go back to what you guys had stated that he only had what 3 yards through or 2 yards through 3 games or something like that. The sad part is at that point you're wondering if their third string running back and Darren Sproles was going to have an overall better season than DeMarco Murray. Um, you made up a good point too that Cowboys are end up going to having to ship someone to Philly. And at the same point too, that system with Chip Kelly, that was with Chip Kelly there, and now he's in San Francisco. So if they ended up not making this trade, you know, do the players take in retrospect that Chip Kelly's gone and maybe stick it out one last year, or do they just say, you know what, we're done with Philly altogether?
And what we're hearing is, I mean, if Philadelphia is they're trying to revert back. They're trying to basically to undo everything that Chip Kelly did. They've already reached out to try to get Nick Foles back. Now they're trying to get rid of DeMarco Murray. To me, it made sense in theory when you heard, oh, okay, DeMarco Murray's going to the Philadelphia Eagles. It didn't. He was an NFL halfback in a college system. Did not work. Of course, do you think, okay, well, he's back with Sam Bradford, that could ignite? No, it didn't. It didn't do anything. It's Kelly destroyed that team, and now the players that he brought in want to leave. The players that he let go, they're trying to get back.
I got DeMarco Murray's stats here, and it looks as if throughout the regular season he only had one 100-yard game, and that was against the New York Giants. So there you go. So it was just
one of the worst rushing defenses in the NFL. Go
yeah.
figure.
I mean, it was a bad relationship really for both these parties, and I mean maybe the Philadelphia's new coach uses him a little bit better. But I mean that's a big risk that you're taking to not trade him and get anything for him, and risk him playing like he did last year. And now he is getting up there in age, so this might be a steal for the Cowboys if they're able to get him back, because he's not gonna, garner those huge deals.
He's getting up there in age, but remember he hasn't been in the league that long. He hasn't been in the league that long at all.
Yeah,
he still has miles left on him.
Yeah, but most teams tend to worry about trading for players that are nearing that 30-year-old mark, where only a handful of running backs have broken that thought process, namely Adrian Peterson. I mean, so he, I think that for the Eagles' sake, they just trade him and get what they can for him. And honestly, Darren Sproles was more effective in this offense than DeMarco Murray could have ever been. Granted, that was Chip Kelly's offense, so we'll see if that plays out the same way it did. But, I mean, it's tough for any Eagles fans out there, because the offseason before this season was just a complete disaster for him, with paying DeMarco Murray these big bucks, not getting any production, paying Byron Maxwell extremely inflated contract for someone who was one of the worst corners in the league this year. It just that eventually caught up with Chip Kelly, and so like you said, it's going to be tough to undo all that Chip Kelly has done, and it's Eagles.
It's gonna take a while.
Yeah, it's going to be a rough maybe year 2 or 3 for Eagles fans out there to wait for Chip Kelly's for what Chip Kelly did to kind of unravel itself, I guess.
Well, we know that Philadelphia needs a lot of work ahead. It has a lot of work ahead of them, and if we hear about trade, you guys will. We're gonna take a break. We'll be right back. Stay tuned.